Hello, everyone. This week, this week I read Dracula. I'm trying to say just Dracula and not trying to do an accent on it, even though I really want to. Dracula. It's just so fun. Okay, Bram Bram Stoker's Dracula. I've never read this book. Um, all those Renfield things were going, and then the last voyage of the Demeter, whatever that movie is, right? Those trailers were running like nonstop, and then I was like, well, it got me thinking, and I had this book able to be gotten on Audible, the Audible Plus. So I'm like, nah, I'll give it a go, right? I mean, it's a classic. It exists for I don't know how long, for a reason, or maybe not for a good reason. I mean, I read Don Quixote and it sucked. Maybe this one sucked. So I was like, I'll give it a go. Let's see what we think. Let's see what we think. Well, what we think is it's fantastic. Four out of five. I think if you like books, if you like to read, I think you'll enjoy this. I think it can be a little slow in spots. It is an older book, so it can be slow in spots. I think a lot of books in terms of movies, right? I think movie people back in the day would have been book people to the for the most part. So if there's a pacing that comes with a movie, right? It's 2 hours long, and most casual readers will want a movie-ish experience in the book. Does that make sense? You get what I'm saying? This one isn't that. It's a little bit slower. There's a lot less action than you would think would come from a Dracula book. So it's not for everyone. But clearly, if you are a reader, this will work outside of your genre. You could take a break from your sci-fi. You can take a break from your romance and give this a go, and I think you'll be very happy. It really is. It's got to be on my top 10 list. I've never done a top 10 list, but it's got to be on the top 10 list. It's tremendous. And then, as I'm sitting here to write my notes, I was trying to think why. What does it do? And I would look at a specific situation, the vampire or this character or that character, and none of it was adding up. And I think that's the point. Our author doesn't have a singular thing, right? It's what did I write down? This is pieces that make the whole. Not pieces that are the whole. What do I mean? If you get a modern vampire book, fantasy book, whatever it is, there's a thing about it, right? We're in space, spaceships, Bigfoot, a werewolf, whatever it is. That's the driving force of the story. He doesn't have a driving force. There's not one singular character that stands out. Even his concept, vampires, isn't overwhelming in a sense, right? But when you let it all seep in collectively, that collective comes together and presses in upon you its point way better than each little piece could have. Versus like what am I trying to think? Like a Dune, right? You have these big bold things, the worm, the knives, the blue eyes, the Baron, these big dynamic things that press upon you. This one isn't that at all. It really isn't that at all. So that it tricks you. It tricks you in a weird way. All the little things conspire almost together to give you I still don't know what to do with my arms because I don't have armrests. So we start off, and I don't like it to start. I really don't. And again, I think some of it, now that I look back, is wanting that big brushstroke to start, right? The one ring to rule them all, even Lord of the Rings. You have this big brushstroke that you're constantly aware of. This does not have that. So it starts off, it's a letter from Jonathan, and he's writing. Well, I already don't like first person stories in general, they usually mess them up. And what we have here is the added depth of a letter, right? So you're bound in more. You don't get to talk about things that this person didn't write down. And it takes time to write, and things are left out or put in. All of these things. You start to see that the pen in the person's hand and say, he wouldn't write arg, he'd just say arg. 10 points if you know what I'm talking about. So so we have two things against it. And as I'm reading, it is slightly interesting. He meets the Count, which you already know is Dracula, right? But even in there, it doesn't, even in the letter, nothing about the writing, the reading of it. Dracula doesn't jump off the page. The Count does not jump. Not like a Sherlock Holmes. You know nothing, this character just jumps out at you. This one doesn't. And so, all through sort of the first letter, in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, clearly he lives, otherwise how would I get his letter? This is kind of dumb. It's defeating the purpose. That's sort of what I was thinking. We then cut to, I believe, Mina, his lady friend. I think his wife, actually. We cut to her, and the whole story then just switches. And I've rarely had stories do this where the energy just gets ramped up so much so quickly. So, Jonathan's writing these letters, and in the letters, situation goes from weird to bad, where he thinks the Count is trapping him. He's going to take over, do something nefarious. He gets this evil sense from the whole situation. Evil. And in it, he says the Count is making him write post-dated letters so that, I can send them at various times, even though I wrote them on this day. And I'm like, that's some sneakiness. So when we cut to Mina, and you see her happily writing about receiving these letters. Now, in my head, the initial go, I don't know if this is one of the exact letters that he post-dated, or that now doesn't matter, right? Because in the writing, the first person, at some point he might stop you from writing letters and forge some letters for you. So now as the reader, I'm in this dark zone. And then here I meet this other lady, innocent. She hadn't done anything wrong. And I know falsities are coming towards her. I know this. I can see it. She doesn't. Right? So it goes from this thing in my mind where it's past and it's done to this thing that's sort of alive. And it's hard. I'm trying to think how I would relate it. Right? So if like you were at school or at work or something and something happened and the internet's out and the phones don't work, your coworkers will say one thing, and then you driving home and you stop for gas and you'll hear things from other people getting gas or the person behind the counter. And I better get some eggs before I go home, or milk or food. And you'll hear other things from the cashier and other things from people in the grocery store, right? And there's a truth beyond your knowledge. Somewhere in the world, this thing has happened. And you're gathering this truth from these people in this disjointed way, right? Till you can get home and safe and figure out what you need to figure out. That's the feeling that I have. As these letters keep coming, it now feels current. It now feels real. I do not know what the next letter is going to say. I don't even know who's going to write the next letter, right? So this character I care about may be dead in the next letter. I have no idea. Events are out of my hands, right? And it carries this energy all the way through the rest of the book. The whole book is different, various letters written by different people, and it carries that energy. It went from, in my mind, no energy to just max level energy. It's very, very good. But add to this, like I was saying, this added, because what you have with first person is the difficulty of that first person. So if I'm in my mind and I pick up a book, right? I won't describe that book to myself. I can see it. And I've seen it before, so the description doesn't matter. I don't care that it's red. I know that it's red. But how can I tell my readers that it's red? How can I tell my readers that Lyndon Baines Johnson's on the side, right? Without just saying, well, this is Lyndon Johnson's on the side. Now it gets out of character. Now, if I describe things in a way that I wouldn't be thinking them, the first person's now failing, right? That's just inner thoughts. We have here is people writing letters. And so I have to, or not me, the author has to then say, you think these things, you'd say these things, but what would you write down, right? That's different. It really is. If you haven't tried, try it. It's different what you'd write down than what you'd say. And now I have to maintain. Okay, so he maintains what that person says. I speak in this way. Now add multiple different people, and each of them varies. Just enough so that you know who's writing. And then he uses quotes from them about other people in the group, right? So those words have to be what this person, accurate, but what they heard. And then another person would write about the same situation, but they would write down different parts of it, right? So I care about what they said. You might care about what they wore. She might care about how they seem to feel, right? In triplicate almost. It's layer upon layer now, which ends up being very descriptive, but hard to maintain. And he does. He does without dropping it for one instance. It's really trippy once it starts happening. Very, very cool. And in depth and difficult, right? And how do I move this plot along? I think what else this does is it orients me as a reader. Not like, here's where I stand. It forces me onto one side of the aisle here. So I'm reading their letters and I'm getting it through them. And me and them have the same black zone, right? There's a thing happening here that we do not know. And we're piecing it together almost at the same time. So I'm parallel to them. And then I start to share their feelings and I start to have concern for all of them as characters. All at once. Very slick, very effective. I imagine extremely hard to do. You know? We then get our various characters. Our guy Jonathan is in, I'm not going to describe every little piece of what happened, again, because it won't do as good, right? It does you no good to know that Jonathan ended up in Budapest or something like this, right? It doesn't get across what the story gets across. But I'm going to bring up a few moments that I thought were cool. I said the Count's not interesting. He's not captivating, but he is interesting. You get the sense. Part of what, he has a great line where he's talking about his lineage. He's from this warlike people. And he talks about how his family, his people, were the ones holding, at the border of Turkey land, I think he says. The Turks. He's holding the Turks off. And in my mind, it like flashed, here's all of Europe, and here's where the Muslims, the Turks, would come. And they're going to hit somewhere first. And I can imagine, it hit me all at once. So way back in the day, there are these groups of people holding off these people. And this family gets the front end of it. If you give it 1,000 years, you've been fighting that war 1,000 years. You've prevented multiple invasions for 1,000 years. And they forget about you. There's no telephones. There's no telegrams. They start living their own lives. Generation gets born and dies, and another one born, and they just grow up in peace. But for you, you've been in the fight the whole time. You've held up your end, so to speak. I love this perspective switch, right? So, if you were a Roman, these were barbarians. But from the barbarians' point of view, the Romans are barbarians, right? So you get the authors pinpointed like a small section and given me that feel of people with honor doing right that may have been just sort of forgotten. But this character, this Dracula, carries that ancient pride, right? So that the memory of that, it comes with him. He could come, admonish the kings of England. Like, where were you? You've left me to defend against the Turks. Your family said this years ago. Mine held up. What about yours? This kind of energy. That ancient honor that's still alive. You get that sense from Dracula. And I thought it was such a great little moment. I also like, because Jonathan's there to help him with paperwork. Of course. Paperwork. That's how everything ends up. Horrible. Dracula needs to buy properties in London. So Jonathan goes out to sort this out. He's a foreigner, bought property. He gets there, he finds out he's evil. But then he's sitting there like, my help, the things I've done for this person is going to help him do his evil in London. He's out here in the middle of nowhere and still bad. What's he going to do when there's millions of people? I like that he understands. And that's another thing you get, a benefit of first person. You can get these internal understandings across more blatantly. Right? So if I knock over your milkshake, I could feel bad about it, but not say it. And everyone just sees, I'm like, well, that's a douchebag. But internally, I'm like, well, my rough day, that milk made me remember this other thing, and I spazzed out. It's once you can see from their perspective, it explains a lot. So that you can get this sense of heroism from this person, who's not essentially a hero. He didn't sign up to be a soldier or anything of this sort. He's just in a situation, and he sees right and wrong, and you can see that he's going to choose to do right. I like that. Speaking of the last voyage of the Demeter, we get some of that in this book. I didn't know. I guess that movie's based on this. Bless their hearts. They end up stuck on a boat with Dracula, and it just goes completely south. It's for a horror book, I'm a bit of a softie for horror. It's not a heavy horror, right? So it's not going to give you nightmares or anything like this. But you do get a sense of dread from these sailors and all this bad that keeps happening to them on this boat. He gets to London, and there's a girl named Lucy who's friends with Mina, wife of Jonathan. And she gets bit. They show in a roundabout way, and that's when we get introduced to our Professor Van Helsing. So cool. A vampire hunter. He's not a vampire hunter. I mean, again, he doesn't outright say that's what he is, but he just has too much knowledge. I love when stories bring the back knowledge, but don't have to explain it. I also like, okay, when you read a book and you feel like, okay, I'm living in this world? I like living in this world because he's a professor. And that's basically all the credential anyone needed to know here's a responsible adult who knows how to handle business, right? And I'm like, that'd be kind of nice. It'd be kind of nice to be able to go to a professor and say, I found this monster, help me kill it. Professors nowadays ain't helping you kill a monster. I'll tell you that right now. No offense if you're a professor, but come on. You know your coworkers. Tell me. You tell me if you believe your professor would go help you kill a monster. Ain't happening, bro. Back in the day, though, adults were adults, right? I'm a professor. I'm a lawyer. Well, here's wrong, and I'm going to go handle it. I'm educated. I like that feeling. I like that feeling of adults in the room. In any case, it's Professor Van Helsing, and he seems to know a lot about this, right? We don't ever really question it. And they try and save Lucy, which gives you this great element, right, where he tries to give her what he calls men's blood. And some part of it almost sounds sexist, but in the way it's written, it kind of isn't. It'd be like saying, I need fireman's blood. This guy's more of a man than normal men. So if we have good, strong men, heroic, forward, unafraid, good, and I take their blood and I give it to Lucy, it should counteract. It ends up going bad for Lucy. Lucy ends up dying. Rip Lucy. Kind of felt bad. And this sort of brings the crew together. The crew being, I believe it's 3 people who wanted to marry Lucy. She picked one. One of the other guys ended up with her sister, and then the third guy, our Quincy from Texas, is just there for love of the game, which I'm from Texas and I like it. I'm like, representing Texas. He was there to marry Lucy. Lucy didn't want him. He's like, fine, but I don't like all this vampire business and how it killed my lady. And I ain't gonna have that. So he just sort of stays to help him fight. Again, you could just go home, bro. There's evil here. I'm going to just stay and help fight. So we have Quincy, John Seward, a doctor, a Lord Goldeming. He had a different name earlier, but I think he ends up with the Lord title. He's our sort of money bags. He's helping finance the situation. Jonathan, the solicitor, Mina, his wife, and also what did I say? She's a transcriptionist. And of course, Van Helsing. That's the other part I was going to say. The letter writing could sound odd, even today, right? Like, let's say I journal. Well, maybe I don't. Maybe everyone doesn't journal, so it would be weird to have. Why are all these people writing letters? But he goes on to explain it. On the one hand, Mina's writing, and I like this idea, honestly, where she says certain women journalists, I guess people who keep journals, not a reporter, write every part of their day down in detail. And as they practice this, they get to where they can describe their whole day and anything they overheard. As as a test of recall. I'm like, that's a cool idea, even today. And I'm like, maybe I should start doing. I was thinking of doing this, but I kind of got self-conscious about my day. Like if I were an actor, and I'm like, well, I better not say this because then when I write it down, I want to write it down this way. So I kind of got weird with it. But I think if you're a normal person, it might be a fun little trial to do to try and write down in detail your whole day, thoughts, words overheard, and not just to write it down, but as a test of recall. I like that concept. I like that idea. It's very cool. So it's partially that, but partially, I think Van Helsing's idea is for all of them to write down as much information as they can as soon as they can while it's fresh on their minds so that then they collectively, which they do a couple of times, they sit and review. And again, so this is what I mean by slower paced. Some of the action scenes are just our crew hanging out, talking amongst themselves. Again, via one person's letter, given this conversation, trying to find out what the Count's plan is, where he might go, how he is safe or unsafe, how we can destroy him, these kind of things, right? They're literally just sitting there brainstorming it. So we get this sort of detective element too. But it's cool that they journaled, and it's cool that that journaling was a useful tool for them. In one of the spots, they even explain, because that's part of, right? Part of a horror, I guess, story is the reader will have certain questions. The killer's in the house. What you think? Leave the house. You then have to give me reasons why they stay, why they can't leave, etc., etc. So, everyone in the story is heroic. They do not want out of the problem, they want in to fix it, right? Yes, they're sad for Lucy, but they are thinking of the wider world as well. So they're like, if I have to die, I will, to stop this evil from spreading. So they're all in it to the end. But then why don't they go to the authorities? Well, then you have to say, well, what am I going to tell them, right? And in that telling, I could convince them, because I am an upstanding citizen. I'm a doctor. I think one ends up a lawyer. You know, we were upstanding citizens, so we'd be believed. But how long would it take? And how entrenched would Count Dracula be, right? And who else would die in the interim? So they're pressed for time in a way. Oh, I was going to say something else. That's another thing. Side note. We Mina's in there transcribing, and then they all agree that, they're like, her part has to end in this. We can't bring a woman into this, which it starts to be a little like, is this sexist? Back in the day, sexism. And I'm like, it's the most and least sexist thing I've ever heard in any story all at once. Because they're like, this is men's work. I don't want a woman in this. It might be too much for her. Even if she lives, the nightmare of it will ruin her life. Right? And I'm like, hold on, she's not that frail. But then he goes, Mina, I need you to stay. He goes, for us, you will become our guiding light. So that in our troubled times, we can think, we do this to keep Mina safe, right? This personal connection. And like old books do, they say, we all have a love for you. Not, I'm in love with Mina, obviously. But this love for this person, this Mina, that she would be safe. We can face more evil as men if we know it's for you, specifically, on top of our wider issues. It'll just be one extra motivator for us. And I'm like, it came off very sweet. And I liked it. I really liked it a lot. And she had to agree to it. So it's sort of like she wants to help too. She's brave. He goes, that's what he says, Van Helsing. She's like, what is it? A man's mind and a woman's heart merge. She's like, men only see this, but a woman can see that. But she's smart like a man, but with this extra perception. She's a benefit to the group, you know? She does agree, and then, it goes south, obviously. She ends up bit. She doesn't die. But I like that feeling that it gave. This extra heroism. That these men are doing this selfless thing out of love for this person. Who has shown bravery. Who doesn't shy away. Who should, right? From their perspective, you should be semi-fainty as a woman. They wouldn't hold it against you, right? But she doesn't. She's brave on her own. And she's inspiring to them. Thought it was very cool. And I think the coolest part, the most, what does it say? I open a lot of other vampire movies, right? And one of the funnest parts, I don't need my notes anymore. One of the funnest parts to me in this book was the vampire world building, right? The rules of the road, so to speak. They were interesting rules. First, he needs some ground from the country he was made in, right? Wherever he became a vampire, he needs the ground there to sleep in or on. So Dracula gets these big boxes and fills it with dirt from Romania, wherever he's from. And he gets like 9 or 10 of them, and he hauls them over to England. He places them in various spots so that he can do his eating and then sleep it off. Right? They get communion wafers and holify them, so he can't use them. Of course, he can't be around a cross or holy wafers. The sunlight doesn't kill him. He not beglittered like them Twilight ones. He just doesn't die. What he does is become a normal man, right? So if you catch him in the sun, you can just stab him and he'd die. After, if you stabbed him in the heart and cut off his head. But he can't do everything he can do at night. At night, he has control over animals. Man can turn into beasts, like a wolf, a bat. He could turn into fog and get in a crack of a window, right? He could move the wind. They do one part where he just crawls out of the castle straight down, super strong. His body takes all kind of damage and it wouldn't affect him. On top of sort of the hypnoticness of his presence, right? I mean, he's stupid powerful at night. But I'm like, that idea where they burn in the sun is cool. But then I'm like, so is also this idea where they don't. It makes for a much different. Can you imagine if Dracula could walk around in the daytime and talk to kings and this and that? They think he's normal, maybe a little pale, but they'd like the cut of his jib, as they say. And then at night he's just eating people, or turning them evil into his minions, right? I love the power scaling in this one. We get to the end, and it's sort of a race. And like I said, you do care. You're interested. You want these people. I don't know who's going to live or die. I'm very nervous about it. We get to the end, and apparently Dracula's paid these gypsies to get his big box into his castle before the. I guess they're trying to do it before sunrise because they don't feel good about it. But the other guys are trying to bust that thing open and kill him before not sunrise, sunset. Right? And it does like a movie where they get there just as the sun is setting. And for this moment, you think Dracula's gonna, he opens his eyes and smiles like, "I got you, bro. It's daylight now." You know. He opens his eyes and he got this moment where he's like, "Bro, I got you. It's daylight. There's nothing you can do." And at that moment, one of the guys, I think Jonathan stabs him in the chest. One of them stabs him in the chest. The other cuts his head off. Right, just like boom, boom, right then. Our poor Quincy in the melee, got stabbed in the side. He doesn't make it. But we do have this moment where they had tried and give Mina communion, right, with that wafer on her forehead, and it scarred her. So they took it as, she's unworthy. So that when Dracula dies, and the way he describes is very great. It's the author, I mean. Like the sun hits her, and everyone sees now that she's made good and wholesome again, like she was before. And you see Quincy's like, it was worth it, look. And then he sort of dies. And they named their kid after Quincy, so they do right by Quincy. He died heroically. Guy can't ask for a Texan can't ask for more than that, right? Go down in the books as heroic. And that's how it sort of ends. It ends sort of quick, but it's very dramatic. And a note on the audio version of it. The audio version I have is Alan Cumming, Tim Curry, and a cast. If you ever can, listen to this audio version. It's tremendous. I like anytime an author is my narrator on an audiobook. They just have a more fluid pacing. And these two, I know the actors, and I don't know who's saying what in the book. That's how good a job they do of just sort of immersion into the characters. It's really great. So if you can, do the audiobook version of it. But it's good either way. It's good either way. His writing is very great. Okay, that was Dracula. Now it's time for the ads. All right, these are my books, obviously. Do I have a book better than Dracula? You know what? I don't know if I do. I'm going to be dead honest. Maybe I don't. It's it is one of the better books I've ever read. Funny how that happens. You go from not I really don't like first person, but when it's done good, it really is enjoyable. Okay, these are my books. You know, buy them with actual money, or I think they're on Kindle Unlimited. You could get Kindle Unlimited and read them all there, and then read some other books. Probably Dracula. I haven't actually checked. It varies. Dracula might be on there in the Kindle Unlimited. Read 4 or 5 books in a month, and then get your money's worth. Helps me either way. I believe. Yeah. Yeah. They give me money for the. It's like Spotify, but with books for the authors. Don't phase me bad either way. Um. All right. These are a complete joy. I will talk to you, lovely lot, next week.